there's, I guess, this broader category of Web3 social, which I think it's useful to use as a reference point.
So speaking of the incentives, how does the Joy or the Happy token, I believe, work in terms of Gleave, the whole platform, and what are the incentives in terms of monetizing for both the content creator, but even the consumers?
The vision that we're going for is we're trying to unlock the ability of developers to build an ecosystem of applications based on a shared pool of data.
We see that there are already apps being built on the platform. So maybe if you could kind of delve deeper into these applications. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 100X Show. And this is quite the interview. Obviously, we've been bullish on a project called Joystream. And very rarely do we really become fascinated with a project that we might even refer to it as a project that reminds us of helium back in the day when people were mining helium devices. But this is a project that has quite intrigued me. And I have the pleasure of having Bedeho, one of the founders here today for the 100X Show, to do a deep dive on the project and for us to learn more about the project and how they plan to disrupt video platforms for Web3. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Ian. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So tell us more about yourself and how you kind of got involved in crypto.
Sure. So I started working professionally in crypto in 2014. So right before that, I was completing my PhD in computational neuroscience at the University of Oxford. So I'm trained as a computer scientist and a mathematician. And then I got really interested in like the brain and how you could build computer systems based on, the same information processing principles that we understand to be present in the brain. But I sort of got a little bit less optimistic on the prospects of doing that sort of work within the context of academia. And, this was towards the tail end of 2013. Bitcoin had just sort of arrived for the first time a little bit in the mainstream. There was a big increase in the price. And I had a lab mate of mine who sort of showed me this and got me interested. So I knew right away that, this was something I wanted to dive deeper into. So when I finished up my PhD, I right away started to look for, use cases for this technology. And back in 2014, really the only use case per se that existed was payments. And really the only platform that existed was Bitcoin. There were some other chains, had your Litecoin and Namecoin and that sort of stuff, but they weren't really serious platforms for you to do anything on. So the use case that I sort of latched onto in the beginning, you can tell this is quite a while ago, but it all kind of fits together with where we are today, was to incorporate micropayments inside of a peer-to-peer file sharing protocol called BitTorrent. Not everyone knows what BitTorrent is today, but it was a very popular protocol for moving data online in the mid-2000s. And the problem with that protocol was always, it's very popular. It was like some very large share of all online bandwidth was BitTorrent. And the problem there was that there was this huge free rider issue in BitTorrent. There really was no incentive for people to provide their bandwidth. And so long tail content really never worked in BitTorrent. And so I thought, hey, we have this distributed system for moving data around. We have this new eCash system for micropayments. And that really was the thinking at the time. It was like cryptocurrency was in large part for small payments. So this was before Lightning or anything like that was really contemplated. And so we started to build that. At the time, it was only me. And about mid-2015, I went to Silicon Valley and participated in an accelerator called Boost VC, which at the time was like the only Bitcoin blockchain-focused accelerator that was around. No one was funding anything. And at the time, I was lucky to meet my co-founder, Mukhtar, who happened to also be in the Valley, just interested in opportunities and interested in crypto. And, the sort of journey launched on from there. So we spent, we raised some money towards the end of that year, early round, and we started to build out this protocol. So it was kind of a combined Bitcoin wallet and BitTorrent client and media player into one product. It's open source. You can still download it and use it today. And we were building that. And while we were doing that, it was sort of from the 2016 to 2018 timeframe. What was happening was that, first of all, the space was growing a lot, and your ability to build new systems based on this technology was radically improving, and the costs were declining in terms of complexity and In the beginning, the only way to really launch a blockchain was like to just fork Bitcoin and change some parameters. And then eventually you saw the advent of these blockchain frameworks like Cosmos and Substrate. And so it becomes much more easier to build these new systems. And what we sort of learned throughout that period was that, BitTorrent had a lot of problems. It never really was able to grow out of that infancy initial phase and become a kind of a full stack media distribution system. But what we did see in the BitTorrent ecosystem, which was very impressive, was how having this open protocol for content distribution made it possible for lots of different developers and ecosystem participants to build out different kinds of complementary software, like different clients, different trackers, analytics software, you name it. It was a very big, even VC-funded ecosystem there. And it was all really contingent on having this protocol that was open for how to do content distribution online in a trustless way. So our thinking kind of evolved from, okay, how can we incentivize the moving of bits and bytes using eCash to how can we build a full stack media platform using blockchain technology and the new kind of primitives that brings about. So having a public ledger, having a stateful index of content, having the ability for governance for how to evolve the protocol and all these sorts of things. So that's sort of where Joystream came from. So you can tell, we've been working on this problem at the intersection of like media content distribution and blockchain for a very long time. And, the modern version of Joystream today really is the culmination of a lot of thinking and trial and error over that period of time. So that's sort of how I made my way in the space until today.
So to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned earlier, so you mentioned that you're building, to my understanding, on Substrate, which is the Polkadot ecosystem. Kind of elaborate on why you chose that over other blockchains or other ecosystems like Cosmos or even Ethereum.
Sure. So there were a few kind of requirements to our mind when we wanted to go for this use case. So we knew that it was very important to have low latency finalization. We wanted to have a lot of block space because these are typically going to be low value transactions. So just to step back a little bit, sort of the vision that we're going for is we're trying to unlock the ability of developers to build an ecosystem of applications based on a shared pool of data. So like the same content and profiles and interactions can be leveraged across multiple different applications. So that means you need a public index for all this state to live. So that means your chain, which is the place where you put this, needs to be an economical and performant place for this information to flow. And so therefore, that kind of automatically ruled out putting it on some kind of a platform chain, like say like an Ethereum, for example, because it just would have been too expensive. I would say it even would have ruled out layer twos, not that they really existed at the time we were making this decision. At this point, we're talking early 2019, we're making this decision. Not really possible to there isn't like an L2 ecosystem out there, but even for those systems, they are still fundamentally bottlenecked by the data availability capacity of the L1, and so they're always going to be highly constrained by how much data they can put on there. So we knew that we really couldn't go for that. So then the question was like, do we either like fork Ethereum or run our own instance where the only transactional data which is there is for our use case? Do we use Cosmos SDK, which at the time was maturing nicely? Or do we go for Substrate, which was just another blockchain framework that came from the Polkadot ecosystem? It was not really tenable to fork Ethereum because once you start forking and making non-trivial changes, the engineering complexity of trying to stay up to date with the security patches and changes upstream from the core Ethereum team is very difficult, and you have to develop a very kind of fine-grained understanding of how the node software works because it isn't really built for customization. So we did actually try to build a testnet and do the required changes to build in the features that we wanted. For example, being able to mint the native asset towards like a governance pool so that you can fund public goods and that sort of thing that isn't native in the Ethereum node software. So we were pretty quickly convinced that wasn't going to be the path. Then it really became a distinction between Cosmos and Substrate. And there were a few differences, and they all pretty uniformly spoke towards Cosmos. I think the one thing that spoke in favor of Cosmos was further along. Cosmos used Go, which is a programming language which has a larger pool of developers, so you're going to have an easier time attracting people and recruiting people for your team. But pretty much everything else spoke in favor of Substrate. So, for example, the Cosmos SDK didn't allow you to have any way to upgrade the way your chain works in flight over time, right? So if you want to change the features of your system on Cosmos, you pretty much have to do a hard fork. And that requires a lot of coordination between your validators. It's like a risky operation, which could end up in a fork. And for us, we knew that governance was going to be key. Maybe we'll get back to that later in the conversation. So having this kind of endogenous upgrading capability was something that was very unique to Substrate that Cosmos didn't have. Cosmos also really means you have to use Tendermint, which is this pretty much first kind of modern proof-of-stake cell algorithm that the Tendermint team was able to ship, which is a great piece of engineering work, and a lot of other proof-of-stake consensus algorithms have been inspired by it. But really, there isn't an easy way. If you wanted to use something else, or if you wanted to have, for example, access to the relay chain as a different way to have finalization, which is this whole Polkadot shared security notion, which was key to the idea of that, which at the time wasn't part of Cosmos. Today, they're starting to embrace that more. You also had much more freedom with Substrate. There are even Substrate versions where you use proof of work as your kind of anti-Sybil mechanism rather than proof of stake. So it's a very flexible framework. So that was a big differentiator. I think another one was, frankly, that the parity team that stands behind Substrate, which is a more seasoned team with much bigger budgets. It was not based in the US. So there are all these kind of social reasons, which also spoke pretty heavily in favor of Substrate compared to Cosmos. Also, we thought, Rust is just better language for writing very kind of security sensitive software. So all these things made it a pretty easy decision, despite the fact that we knew it would be harder to attract developers.
All right. Thanks for that answer. Very, very informative. Now, let's kind of let's actually take a back step and go back at library and competitors.
Okay, so there's, I guess, this broader category of Web3 social, which I think it's useful to use as a reference point. Within that, you have things like, Lens Protocol, CyberConnect, Farcaster. All these are systems where you're trying to build a platform for social networks in one way or another using blockchain technology to a greater or lesser extent. I think within that overall sector, video is something that very, very few have focused on. And I think that's actually a key differentiator when you think of us versus other things that maybe sound the same. So, for example, I would say the only other really serious effort that's been put forward towards building a open video platform, I would say, is Library. Now, if I'm just going to focus on Library, I think there are many different important distinctions between us and them. I would say, though, first of all, they started very early with this specific vision. So when we started all the way back in the day in 2015 or so, people would speak about us and Library kind of in the same breath, but their vision was sort of much closer to what Joystream is doing today than what we were actually doing at the time, right? Because we were very focused on the protocol level. So we were much more focused on something like what, let's say, LivePeer does today or what Theta does today, which is just be this infrastructure level component for moving data. So Library was always focused on being this content ledger where they would put creator profiles and content, and then they would build applications on top. And I think they've had a lot of success. They've grown to have a very big pool of creators use them. I think they have had quite a lot of utilization of their applications. I think what's been difficult for them is maybe a few different things. First of all, they started very early, and they started as a Bitcoin fork. And so they've kind of been stuck with technology for a very long time. It means it's been difficult for them to build in lots of important things that probably they would have benefited from, for example, like having an explicit governance layer, being able to fund infrastructure, fund development. They're basically in the same kind of token model as what Bitcoin was in, which I think pretty much is a non-starter for the kind of use case that we're talking about. I think another problem for them is definitely they've had a bunch of legal issues, which I think people may be aware of, where they've been sued, and that's been kind of weighing them down for a long time, which I think is a real shame. It's probably has changed a lot of how that protocol could have evolved if they were operating under better circumstances. But I think, so the differences between us and them is, of course, we're using very new technology in terms of our blockchain, in terms of, being proof of stake, in terms of the throughput capabilities and confirmation times and all this kind of stuff. It's much easier for us to build in new features because we were built on a explicit blockchain SDK, whilst they used a fork. I think actually used BTCD, which is like a Go fork of Bitcoin, but still it's not a good development platform. And so for us, for example, we have a native governance layer, which is very sophisticated and it's been tailor made to really operate a platform like this. We have a built-in CDN layer and storage layer. So for example, on Library, there isn't really any native part of the protocol that holds onto the data or delivers it on demand to end users. So really all of that was concentrated within the kind of Library development entity. So now when that probably is going to get wound down, there's a big question mark for that ecosystem protocol. Who's going to hold the data? How do you get the data? Who's going to pay the bandwidth bill? Who's going to deliver the content? Who's going to run the redundant infrastructure, last mile delivery? All of that is built into the Joystream protocol, right? Because we have a DAO, which has a dedicated set of staff, which does this. It has a built-in on-chain capability and index for where all the data is. There's dedicated node software for delivering this content, and it's by operators that are staked in the DAO, and they can be slashed by the DAO. So there's just been a lot more thought into building a full-stack video platform into the chain itself, rather than having this very, very thin index layer, which is what Library does, and then it puts everything into like the app. So for example, all the comments and reactions and social features that you may find in Odyssey, which is a reference application kind of built on Library, that's in a private database, which something will happen to it eventually. While on Joystream, all that is within public index. So that means anyone who builds an application can automatically get access to all this data, ingest it into their application, and interoperate and get this data to make their experience very, very valuable. So I think this focus on ease of development, governance, built-in infrastructure. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we focused on these creator monetization tools that are kind of emerged as being very promising over the years. So we have video NFTs where you can sell videos to your audience, and you have social tokens, sort of like Friendtech, like you mentioned, where video creators can issue kind of a revenue share token for their channel, and they can sell them, and they can raise money, and they can pay out revenue shares to their audience. And all this stuff is kind of built into our system rather than being something that's layered on top in the application. So I think as far as Library is concerned, there are a lot of important differences that come from the fact that we simply were able to start later and benefit. Of course, it means we have a smaller network effect. We haven't come as far as they did or as they have. And we're catching up there using some of the lessons, the go-to-market lessons that they were able to demonstrate, and it's been working pretty well so far. I mean, I could go through some other examples, but I think you asked about Library, so I focused on them.
Yeah, that was great. So let's maybe kind of delve deeper into this really being a protocol or platform, to my understanding, to develop even more video applications. Because I think that's definitely a big differentiator. Because when you go to the website here, we see that there are already apps being built on the platform. So maybe if you could kind of delve deeper into these applications and the future roadmap or rather the future vision of what you envision Joystream being and the kind of apps being built on here. Because here, for example, we have Gleave, which basically says it's a Web3 crypto content vertical. We have I1 Media. So it seems like people are building all these different applications on Joystream. How do you think this is going to coalesce down the road? Do you think there'll be kind of like a killer app? What's that vision look like?
Yeah, I want to be very clear. We're still in the early days of that developer innovation being unlocked. We've been on mainnet for about 8 months or so, and the main focus for us has really been to accumulate more content and more creator profiles, because there's really nothing for developers to do if they don't have that core data to put in their applications, to present in their applications. So far, we have 2 applications. Now, I think the main thing that you're going to be seeing in the beginning is people focusing not so much on having a differentiated user experience, because that is like requires much more effort to do. You need to do like you need to have a pretty deep idea about how you want your experience to be. You need to do lots of product design and engineering. I think the easiest path to building something new on top of our platform is people who just focus on certain content verticals. So people who focus on a certain theme, let's say you focus on like a certain kind of sport or religion or politics. So you are able to build a community that's really focused on a particular kind of a topic, because what that does is that it becomes a very attractive place for creators that fit that niche to put their content. Because the most difficult thing, in particular for a new creator today on YouTube, is it takes a lot of time for you to be able to get matched with the right audience. The algorithm takes a lot of time to learn about your channel. There's just so much content there. So you're kind of, you take a very long time, certainly before you're monetized, but also before your content gets syndicated properly into the different kind of recommendation services that YouTube has. So by focusing on particular types of content, we believe that it's going to be much easier for developers to build new experiences that are much more efficient at matching viewers and creators than in the massive pool of content that YouTube offers. Because if you're like as a content consumer, the fact that there are 800 million or so videos on YouTube isn't actually terribly relevant to you, because you probably only care about 2 or 3 different niches, right? So if there is one destination out there which serves one of those niches in a better way than YouTube, because it's just a denser a pool of content focused around that niche, and the social interactions are of a higher quality, and in general everything is more tailored to what you're trying to do, you don't even need to have a very differentiated product experience, right? So that's our hypothesis for where we want to go. Of course, longer term, we also want to see developers building totally new form factors, right? Just in the way that TikTok is a totally different way of consuming and engaging with content to what YouTube had before they had YouTube Shorts. That's what we're expecting long term. But I don't think you want to rush and expect that right away. But even before any of this, our core priority through our partner program is to bootstrap the creator pool that's present on our chain. So there's just a baseline level of content there that creators can that can be consumed, and that developers down the road can actually. Because if you don't have the data, that's actually what we're offering that YouTube doesn't have. Right, you can't really build on top of YouTube, or you wouldn't be very well advised to do so. But what we're offering is for the content to actually be available to developers to build and repackage into new experiences, and that means we need to get further along with our creator adoption. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, yeah. So now I've also kind of been digging deep into the documentation, and it seems early on it's mainly geared towards developers building this. How do non-developers get involved in a project like this in terms of whether it's posting content on YouTube? Because my understanding is you have to run a node to be able to repost content. So how can a non-developer, somebody who's non-technical, get involved early on?
So if you're a creator, which I would say is the main audience we would like to get involved, then you don't need to run Node software if you're a creator. So if you have a YouTube channel, all you need to do is you need to sign up, for example, on Gleave.xyz. And what that does is it allows us to ingest all of your content on YouTube over to Joystream automatically, and you'll get paid for that on a weekly basis. And we have a sign-up reward for that as well. And so that's probably the most tangible way you can get involved as a new person. If you have content and you are willing to bring it to the platform and you want to get paid, and you'll get paid much more than you are paid on YouTube, that's for sure, unless you're one of these very, very prominent creators. So that's, I think, the primary way to get involved if you're actually a creator. If you're more someone who wants to be involved on the community side, then you can run infrastructure, you could run content delivery nodes, storage nodes. If you're more of like a developer, or you're more of like a governance person, then you can join us in the DAO. There are lots of paid positions. There's a very, very active DAO that has a lot of activity around advancing the platform. Certainly, when you think of the team behind Joystream today, that's very, very much a broader team than the team that launched Joystream on mainnet. So people do marketing and HR and software engineering and, of course, the infrastructure side. So there's a very varied set of skills that are catered to in the DAO side of the platform. as well.
Even better. That's awesome. I'm definitely going to check it out. I definitely do have plans of actually publishing my own content, but also content for token metrics on Joystream. So it looks like we just do it directly on Gleave. Actually, it looks like it's right here on the menu. So basically, we go to YPP, connect to a YouTube channel, and get paid. So speaking of the incentives, how does the Joy or the Happy token, I believe, work in terms of Gleave, the whole platform, and what are the incentives in terms of monetizing for both the content creator, but even the consumers?
Yeah, so the native token, the Joy token, that's the unit of account within the system. And if you sign up through this partner program, you'll be paid on a weekly basis. And when you sign up in that token for your channel, and the amount you're paid depends on how many followers you have and things like that. But there's some pretty sizable quantities compared to what you could expect from the ad system on YouTube, for example. Now, the further opportunities for monetization for our creators would typically be to issue video NFTs. So that allows you to basically sell a video so that you can allow your audience or people on already on our platform to buy your content in the video form. And I think video NFTs have really kind of been unexplored so far. There are a few other platforms I've seen that are focused on this vertical, but I think it's still very nascent. It's interesting because YouTube itself has said that it's playing around with launching video NFT, so they're clearly interested, but who knows what will materialize there, but you're able to do it on our system. So I think the video actually you showed a few moments back was a video NFT which had been sold for a few $100, which was of myself explaining something to a third party. Then the feature that's coming down the road in Q3 is the creator token feature, which is effectively like a friend tech kind of functionality, but for video creators. We started to work on this a long time ago, and we're very happy to see that people are interested in and intrigued by the whole friend tech phenomenon. But this is something we've been working on for a very long time, and that's really great for creators who have an audience where they think that the audience maybe you want to, first of all, support them for them to make investments in improving their production quality or what have you, but also to incentivize their audience because there's a revenue share component to those creator tokens as well. So if you get paid by the DAO, if you sell video NFTs, if you get tips, all these revenue streams are captured in your creator token, and they're distributed pro rata to your creator token holders as well. So that would be another very important channel for creators to both get financing and monetization.
That's great. I definitely know lots of content creators that would definitely be intrigued by this opportunity. So last question I have then is kind of speak to how Joystream is handling things different from Library, who's had issues with regulators in terms of launching a video platform. My understanding is you're basically building a DAO, so kind of speak on how you plan to navigate the landscape.
Sure. I mean, I can share some thoughts about this. One thing you may notice from our story is that we were in development for a very long time, from early 2019 till late 2022, while we're building our chain and our product and so on. And there are multiple reasons for that. Certainly, once you're live, it's much harder to iterate on things by virtue of the fact that blockchains are this neutral public infrastructure, but also because, frankly, really the wisdom in the space has been you really want to build a very, very mature technology stack and system, which to a minimal extent depends on one important third party for it to operate and function properly. And so for us, we launched a very, very mature system, which could do a lot of things, as you can, glean from this conversation, all the way from content delivery to funding development to, launching applications. All this stuff doesn't depend on us actually as the original issuers being involved in driving that forward. And of course, the token holders have a lot of control and autonomy, and they're directing really all the key upgrade questions and financing questions in the project. So I think we're in a very different position in that regard. Of course, we're not US based, and we've never sold tokens to people in the US or anything like that. So we're also in a good position in that sense. So, these things are dynamic and they shift, and it's hard to know exactly how the space will evolve when it comes to the regulatory side, but we've put in a lot of effort on staying on the safer side when it comes to how the project was launched, financed, and now is being governed.
So speaking of that, could you speak on the early launch of Joystream My understanding is it had some kind of fair launch early on. So for people who are just discovering the project now, kind of share us how the project initially launched.
We didn't have a fair launch in the sense that there was no pre-allocation to any stakeholders at all. We've done VC funding 2 rounds, and so that wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been feasible for us to do everything we did if it was a fair launch in that sense of the word. There was a very large community allocation to the launch that we did in December of last year, where we had built this pool of very dedicated what we call founding members, who were really with us for years with a lot of actual uncertainty about when we would launch and what it would look like. And those people were pretty well rewarded in terms of the share of the token supply that they were allocated at the launch of the system in December. And those are really the people that are driving it forward now. So if you come into our Discord, you can see lots of people with these unique avatars that we gave out over a few years period. And people have worked very hard to establish that status in our community. And they've all been rewarded well. And that was really a key to being able to rely on having this open community that could drive it forward and be incentivized and capable to do so, because there are a lot of different kinds of domains of expertise that have to come together for a platform like this to work. And the people who are occupying those different roles now, running infrastructure, doing governance, discussing upgrades, changing metadata standards, all this kind of stuff, they've been with us for many years, and for that. So I would say, yes, that's part of our background. We're very much welcome new people in still. It is a DAO. If you go on our landing page, you can see all the different positions that are in the DAO, what they're paid for, and you can kind of discover more about how you get into them. So there's very much opportunity still going forward. Would want to emphasize that as well.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so for those who maybe want to track the on-chain data or metrics of Joystream, is there a dashboard or somewhere online where they can find those metrics and basically track the growth and traction of the project as it is now and in the future?
Yes, we do have a public community dashboard which shows you how many videos we have. We have about 80,000 videos or so now. We have about 1,900 channels. We're growing about 10 to 20% on most of those metrics week over week, so it's growing very fast. We have a public community-operated dashboard. I don't remember off the top of my head what the URL was. We're going to make a dashboard page for our website, so there's an easy way for you to consume all this data. But yes, that is available, where you can see all the profiles and channels being generated, videos being uploaded, and all that stuff over time.
All right. Well, this has definitely been a very fascinating interview. This is a project I'm very intrigued with. I'm definitely going to be posting content on here and just getting more involved. Now, any last words for anybody out there in terms of Joystream? If you could just tell them one thing, what would you say?
I would say, first of all, if you have a favorite creator that you would want to see on our platform, please tip them off. We always want to have more creators come on board. And I'm sure maybe we could give you a referral fee or something like that. So that's our number one priority. Number two, if you have any kind of skill set that you think could be useful for a video platform, if you know how to run node software, if you know how to do marketing and graphics, do you know how to deal with people, the HR side, the governance side, please join us on our Discord. We have daily stand-ups every single day, very well attended, lots of nuanced discussions. So please join us there. We will find place for you if you want to contribute. So please join us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bedeho. I'm great to have you here, and best of luck with the project. Very fascinating project. And to our audience, we definitely have more content on this on our channel. Just go to Tokenmetrics for both the research report on this, and we've done a code review on this. Very, in my opinion, good project, obviously. But with that being said, thank you so much, Bedeho, and I will see you next time. And as we like to say, the moon is not the limit to the moon and beyond. Thank you. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, we have even more content for you at Tokenmetrics. Get there using the link down below.